time for masks is over. You risk challenging an eldest, and I accept the challenge. You will fight not a mere embodiment, but my true essence. This is my essence. I don't need magic or servile monsters to destroy you. Words are enough. Yes, words. I once told you, words spoken in the right time and place possess the power of a storm. You lightheartedly answered that you know what your power and essence are. The desire to make the world live by your rules. I remember your answer. The world remembers it too. Your answer, your heart, your essence. Now, cursed key. I'm taking this part of your soul, as I took away Nerissa's ability to love. What you called your essence is yours no more. Let us continue. We both wear a crown. But what do you own? A meager patch of land, a few thousand souls? My dominion is chaos and magic, madness and deceit. Your power is nothing compared to mine. And that is why you are helpless before me. You will take my every blow as a divine punishment, as something imminent. I'm curious what you think of me, cursed king. Do you see me as a villain, or a simple joker? In truth, well, never be able to conceive of the truth. Being an eldest means being one of the many strings that hold the world in place. Being an eldest means being such a vast and self-sufficient value that one's equals become strangers and one's inferiors are entirely insignificant. I am an eldest. Laughter, guile, transformation, that's what I am. Being what I am, I will let you feel a modicum of my loneliness. I will take away your pillars of strength. Good. You can play with words. Let us see if you can withstand the heat of my fire. Feeling. I don't remember sensing you for a dozen millennia. But what's next? How will you end this story? Listen, I know. Elegant and refined. The hero defeats a deity in battle. Impressive, he grants the victor power and immortality. The hero enters the chambers of the deity to become his champion and herald. Eternal, powerful, equally glorified both in the first world and in Galarian. His kingdom healed from its wounds and flourished under the rule of the immortal champion. A beautiful ending, isn't it? And this legend is yours for the asking. That is easy. I will return your kingdom to Galarian and strengthen its connection to the First World. In their homeland, the Fae can endlessly return to life. I'll give to you the same gift. So long as you will remain an enclave of the First World, death within its borders will never threaten you. As for the prize, I'm not offering you the position of a servant. Believe it or not, I am lonely. Divine power and immortality are a heavy burden. To accept it means losing all your friends and companions, but you can find allies and reliable assistance. This is what I'm looking for. A herald and a general with whom I can share eternity, and together we'll play 1,000 wonderful pranks and spread our power across the First World and further, much further. Did I tell you I don't like dying? Well, I don't. Perhaps we should stop this pointless exercise and speak seriously? Wonderful. I played one of my best performances and received a fine assistant for my future entertainments. I release you from the curse. May the fatal bond between you and your land be destroyed, and another one be born, between you and your new patron. From my light I bestow light upon you, and from my power, may neither death, nor time, nor frailty ever touch you, my champion and herald. Your kingdom will return to Galarian. Calm your subjects, and threaten your neighbors if they think you weak and vulnerable, and await my summons. Eternity awaits. Believe me, it will be exciting.
Now that the eldest and other spiteful beings wouldn't be bothering us, the king returned to his subjects and celebrated the victory and the end of the kingdom's miseries with great fanfare. Everything gradually returned to normal, including our exciting lives. Not always peaceful, but also not troubled by invasions from another world. And little by little, our heroes and the common folk began to forget the sorrows of the past. So the kingdom returned to Galarian, but not without taking a piece of the First World with it. Miracles and strange occurrences, both kind and cruel, became the norm. Not that the citizens hadn't grown used to that. And the king became the Lantern King's herald. Who knows what mission was assigned to him? Our scouts now sneak across Galarian with secret tasks, and our fighters and wizards spend plenty of time in the First World. But we became something straight out of legends. A country with a mysterious, immortal king whose existence spans 2 worlds. The kingdom built by our hero became an example for all its neighbors. What else would you expect? The Stolen Lands became the only place where the citizens sincerely toast the health of their ruler. The citizens lived trouble-free, and taxes made it to the treasury without losses. A powerful army guards the peace. Exploration of magic is on par. The temples are flooded with their congregations. And, most importantly, our cultural contributions are at least the equal of Absalom. Just half a year after the war with the First World, Galt moved its troops to the southern border of the kingdom. Their attack was rebuffed. The enemy state's infantry retreated when the army's wizards brought down rains of fire and magical arrows on the heads of the flabbergasted enemy soldiers. Since then, Galt hasn't risked crossing any borders again, fearing cruel retaliation for further insolence. Who'd have thought that some tiny barony founded in the Stolen Lands by an adventurer would become a real kingdom, playing a prominent part in world politics? Of course, not everyone likes the proactive stance of this young, bold state, but the fact of the matter is, they can't afford to ignore the king and his diplomats. How do you turn the Stolen Lands, savage and unruly, into a stronghold of safety and stability? The king found an answer. by creating a police state. There are always some who are unhappy with the excessive interference advisors have in the citizens' lives, of course, but their protests are easily overlooked. The king became a true patron of fine crafts. Over time, the castle treasury filled with wonderful gifts from the best masters in the area. Armor, weapons, even magical artifacts. And the collection is still growing. No kingdom can function without its nobility, and the kingdom in the Stolen Lands is no exception. Landowners, ready to share the burden of ruling alongside the king, grew to be more and more influential over time. And the more pompous the court balls and receptions held by dukes and baronets became, the more eventful were the lives of the schemers and freeloaders who always lived within the shadows of the powerful. Using necromancy in service to the state is a solution as bold as it is desperate. Pharasma's church still makes frequent, and frankly reasonable, plans to send a massive crusade against the Stolen Lands to cleanse the nest of vice. The kingdom's citizens, however, not only yielded to the use of an undead workforce, they actually supported it. After all, someone has to do the most dangerous, most unpleasant work. The feud between Brevois North and South, which had been smoldering for ages, finally sparked the fires of civil war. Our troops lent aid to the forces of House Sertova, suffering terrible losses as they took the brunt of the damage from the Sword Lord's forces. The rebellion was soon crushed, and Jumanji Eldori was beheaded in Restov's central square. And for a long time, any hope of an independent Rostland died with her. Chandra Merve became an ambassador at our court once more. The arrogant old lady misses no chance to remind us that House Sertova considers us nothing more than vassals. The Tiger Lords found it difficult to recuperate after what Armagh did to them. The barbarians remaining in Numeria weren't very happy that we sheltered the deposed chief and his supporters, but they were too afraid of him to attack us over it. That bomb has a long fuse, but it's definitely burning. I'm afraid that a few generations down the road, the grandchildren of the current Tiger Lords may want to retaliate against us for their grandfathers. Pitax had never been a paragon of law and order, but now it had become one giant bandit den. That had its benefits. A good share of the profits made their way to the treasury without fail, and the black markets held anything you could hope to find. But Pitax brought a lot of trouble too, as thieves, extortionists, and drug dealers spread their tendrils throughout the entire kingdom. Carnivariel wasn't governor for long. He was found hanged in the central square, with a sign on his chest saying Iravetti's bootlicker. Amid chaos and fighting, Headmistress Gitaren managed to preserve the Academy of the Arts, though not its reputation. Only sycophants willing to dash off odes to the highest bidder, primarily our king, stayed to work and study under her tutelage. One could say the academy still flourishes, though in the same way a pond covered with duckweed turns green on a sleepy summer day, slowly becoming a swamp. No one dreams of studying at the academy anymore, but for those more concerned with reality than dreams, it will always have a comfortable room. Trolls and kobolds, two of the most savage native peoples living in the Gnarl Marches, were completely exterminated in the region. The forest paths became much safer, and the peasants' cattle have stopped going missing. Bartholomew Delgado still serves the king loyally. From time to time, he orders peculiar mechanisms and substances from all corners of the world. After receiving them, he spends a few days bragging about some great discovery he's about to make, then ends up gloomy for a few months. Then he receives another package, and the process repeats itself. At night, chilling screams are often heard from his laboratory. Unfortunately, without its founder, Varnhold never really recovered from the blow. Over time, the colony withered away, all the more so when its dwellers continued to disappear under mysterious circumstances. It took less than 2 years for Varnhold to permanently become a ghost town. The only person happy about the news was the king's new advisor, a mysterious and powerful wizard who still serves the ruler loyally to this day. No one knows what happened to the vanished dwellers of Varnhold. It feels like everyone just keeps trying to forget about them. There are still those who blame the king for their disappearance, but they prefer to do so very, very quietly. After the kobolds and mites disappeared, the empty caves beneath the old sycamore quickly became home to all kinds of disgusting critters, giant centipedes being the most innocent and pleasant of them. Attempts have been made to clear out the caves, but it never takes long for something to take up residence again. In the end, the decision was made to block the entrances and burn the giant tree down, destroying the roots that held up the ceiling of the caves. Oleg's trading post now resembles a border stronghold more than a haven for merchants and travelers. A town sprung up around it, from which the leader of the guard operates. Oleg and Svetlana aren't too happy about it, but at least they don't have to fear for their lives anymore. Jod and Keston, after surviving the bloom, remained loyal to the king they followed through thick and thin, and they continue to serve as court advisors to this day. The austere priest and the gloomy warrior regularly argue over the proper way to govern the state, as well as which of the two rulers should hear out first. Some things never change. Keston Gares took a post as chief of the kingdom's guard. The former heir to a noble family never returned to Brevoy, severing all ties to his kin. However, a few years after the victory over the First World, a girl arrived from Brevoy and soon married Keston. They say Keston started smiling a lot more after that. Jod remained loyal to the king to the end of his days, healing the sick and generously sharing his austere wisdom with anyone who wished to hear it, and some who didn't. Having fulfilled his duty to the ruler, Erastil's priest peacefully departed this world, surrounded by friends and disciples. The Fae took a fancy to the kingdom, feeling totally at home here. They often play various pranks, but they never do any serious harm. Falcos and Teresia managed to restore the magic forest. Once freed of the anger of the Scythe Tree, people returned to the abandoned village, and it became a haven of friendship between the Fae and ordinary people, just like old times. A delegation of wizards from Absalom and other areas appeared in the kingdom one day, asking for permission to examine the lair of the Lich Farneris the Thoughtful. After completing their research, the wizards spent a long time thanking the king for freeing the world of that monster. In their opinion, he'd been capable of causing the end of the world, maybe even 2 worlds. The sweet teeth departed on a journey, hoping to see as many wonders as possible of this world and others. They keep sending us news from every corner of the map. Their bright painted wagon, drawn by a bull mastodon, crisscrosses Galarian, somehow appearing in the center of one incredible story after another. Evindra was glad to see the Lantern King's plans turn to dust. She spent some time helping restore the kingdom after the calamity, then returned home to the First World. They say the rebellious spirit of her cousin Nyrissa awoke within her as well. Evindra is said to recount our story to the Fae, encouraging them to question the power and might of the eldest. After the victory, the storyteller abandoned his affairs and began spending a lot of time alone in contemplation. He eventually bid farewell to the king and left his lands. But I suspect the inhabitants of Galarian haven't heard the last of this mysterious traveler, for his own story is hardly finished. The ancient artifacts gathered by the king built the foundation of a museum collection that has become famous even in far-off Absalom. Amiri stayed close friends with Nylath, but she remained a pariah to all the other members of the Six Bears tribe. Despite all the wisdom of their new chief, the tribe never found its place among the unfamiliar plains and cities, and they soon broke apart. the two friends left the kingdom together, setting off to find their own adventures. Enough that it would take a separate book to tell them all. Valerie stayed to serve the king, and to this day, she terrifies anyone who would dare break the law. Forceful and assertive, Valerie has finally shed her crowd of admirers and set herself upon the path of ultimate law, the same path so honored by the austere Hell Knights. Need I even mention that Valerie eventually decided to try on their black armor, only to find that it was a perfect fit? Harren became famous, respected by dwarves throughout our kingdom as well as our neighbors, even as far as the Five Kings Mountains. He's often been asked to help out or teach others, and he's never denied anyone, despite his grumbling. Some people even listen to his preaching. Lucky for us, there's a lot less howling about the end of the world now, and more wise words of moderation and humility. Not all of his disciples turned to Grotus, but everyone took away something useful from his teachings. One moonless night, Jaethal mysteriously disappeared. Soon, frightened fishers discovered her body, really truly dead now. A young elf named Nortellara came to the funeral, claiming to be the daughter of the deceased. She didn't grieve for her mother overmuch, and she began carousing almost straight away, moving from balls to feasts to hunts. She acquired a crowd of admirers and treated the king as though they'd known each other 100 years or more. Some even assumed they were particularly close. Octavia stayed in the capital as the king's advisor and loyal companion, a true socialite, and one of the most influential and desirable women in the entire kingdom. The balls put on by Octavia were frequented by nobility from every neighboring country, and she enjoys bragging to barons and counts alike that she achieved her status all on her own, a common half-breed from no family to speak of. Only Rigongar spoils her happiness. They fight constantly, and she fears that his drinking or some other stupid trick of his will drive him to an early grave. Rigongar hung up his sword and began the life of luxury he'd always wanted. Admirers lined up outside his door, women and men alike. He indulged in every pleasure, wearing luxurious clothes and hosting orgies that would make Calistria blush. He quarreled more and more often with Octavia, who feared his drinking and unruly temper would drive him to an early grave. After these fights, he'd drown his resentment in wine. These days, he's hardly ever sober, and his trembling hands can barely even hold a sword. Ekin spent a few years in the Stolen Lands, and in that time won glory as the most rugged monster hunter in all the River Kingdoms. The ranger exterminated even the most harmless of the monsters around the capital, then moved on to other lands and new victories. They say the ruthless avenger and slayer of wild monsters made it as far as Katapesh. That's where his trail went cold. I'm afraid Ekin may have become the prey of one of his targets. Jubilost returned to the life of a traveling explorer, frequently visiting his favorite kingdom. He said so himself. His famous work studying the First World all opened with a dedication to his longtime companion, the king. Another name was also mentioned, 2Z, my guide and inspiration. Admirers would ask Jubilost many times about this mystery lady, but he would only chuckle, hitch his knapsack on his shoulder, and return to storm the vast expanses of the First World once again. As for Knock Knock, Jester Knock Knock, he continued to be a great source of entertainment for the kingdom, both in and out of the throne room, sometimes even on purpose. His antics in the kingdom had an additional effect. Aside from bringing joy and amusement to the citizens, it also softened the common view of goblins. They even became welcome in the streets of the city, for a time. While he may not have become the hero he envisioned, Knock Knock did find himself and his inner strengths thanks to the king. If you should ever find yourself in the kingdom, be sure to seek him out. He'll gladly regale you with some new tale of adventure, one that will surely make you smile, whether our foolhardy, clumsy, well-intentioned goblin means to or not. It must be said that the king found a double happiness in his beloved twin tieflings. The three of them are rarely seen together because Kalika looks after her shelter for tiefling children, while Kanera busies herself with trade deals. And both sisters serve as patrons of a school of magic devoted to Nethys. But when the incredible trio do happen to be seen together, just looking at them makes everyone smile. And their common wedding was nothing short of spectacular. The magical fireworks at its finale were the stuff of history, and ever since, many brides and grooms across the neighboring lands have made it a habit to decorate their wedding hats with little horns. Despite all the woes that befell the country, our king remains a strong leader. Many noble houses from neighboring lands wouldn't hesitate to be related to him, and they regularly send a variety of marriage proposals. As for myself, the author of this book, Lindsay, who never chose a pretty nickname, I stayed here, within my own book, to watch what happens in the kingdom and one day write this epilogue. I hope, O honored reader, that you learned something important from this story, or at least were entertained by it. And now that it's concluded, I have only to set the final period and go silent forever.